If you're like me, you opened a pack of Murders at Karlov Manor and got sad. But then you opened a second pack of murders and got complete and absolute despair. But then for some godforsaken reason you open a third pack of MKM and holy moly! Now that's a commander that'll surely bury our competition. But Magic is expensive, and I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars just to play. That's where I come in. Hi, my name is Jared here on MTG, and today we're going to be looking at building a budget commander deck around Anzrag, the Quake-Mole. If you watch my other deck tech for Niv Mizzet, you'll see that this video's format will be pretty similar. First, I'll go over our $50 budget build of the deck, talk about the cards we're putting in, and discuss the general strategy of what we're trying to do. Then, we're going to increase our budget from $50 to $100, see what cards we're putting in, and go over some potential swaps so we can take this deck to the next level. Finally, we'll be going over our top 10 budgetless cards we can save up for. This is just a list of cards that we wish we could put in, but our budgets won't allow. Of course, if along the way you decide you like what I do, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe so you'll be notified when another video drops. It also really helps the channel, so if you already did, thank you. Now without further ado, let's get into the list. Let's start off by giving our commander a closer look. For 2 generic mana, a red and a green, we get a legendary 8/4 Mole God, which is already a very aggressive stat block. But since this is Magic in 2024, this card does so much more. Whenever Anzrag becomes blocked, we'll untap each creature we control and take an additional combat phase after the current one. Now Watsu could have easily stopped there, but decided to add more text. If we play 3 generic, 2 red, and 2 green, we can make it so that Anzrag must be blocked during each combat this turn if able. Now, you don't need me to tell you that this card is an absolute truck. It's an obnoxious 8-power creature that deals commander damage, so your opponents would probably want to block it, except that if they do, we'll just get an additional combat step and attack again. And we can also force our opponents to block, even when they wish they couldn't. This is exactly what we want to do here. Just have an enormous commander come down, clear path, and beat face. The true Gruul way. But Anzrag does have a few problems that we'll need to address. And the first problem I want to talk about is mana. The God's activated ability costs 7 mana to activate, so we'll need some mana producers to help us get there quickly. We're in green, so we have plenty of options to choose from, but let's start with our mana dorks. Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic fit the bill neatly here, as well as a new addition from Modern Horizons 3 of Nightshade Dryad, which also functions as a rattlesnake since it has Death Touch. We're also running some fun inclusions like Jurta Druid, which deals a damage to everyone when we tap it for mana, Radha, Heir to Keld, which can get us 2 red mana when she attacks, and Ruby, Daring Tracker, a hasty mana dork that can grow bigger every time we attack with a big creature. And yes, Ruby's triggers will stack with each combat we take with Anzrag, so have fun making Little Red Riding Hood gigantic. But these mana dorks aren't the only way we can make mana though. Cards like Jolene, Plundering Pugilist, and Roxanne, Starfall Savant, make treasures and meteorites respectively that we can tap for mana. Roxanne also has the added bonus of giving us an extra mana when we use an artifact token. Good thing we need to tap those treasures to make the mana. We're also running a Rampant Growth to go tutor us an extra basic land card, and a Wild Growth to give us an extra green when we tap whichever enchanted land we have. Lastly, we got our 3 mana rocks, Talisman of Impulse, Commander Sphere, and Felwar Stone. Easy, right? Well, we also got a secret mana producer in the form of our Minecraft Diamond Pickaxe, which I swear we're probably going to get a Minecraft secret lair sometime soon. But this little thing is fun. It's a 1 mana indestructible equipment that gives a creature +1/+1 and a treasure token when it attacks. A cheap and sneaky way to get some extra mana. But what about when our commander eventually dies and we need to pay for our commander tax? Fortunately, we got some mana reducers. Goblin and Narcomancer is just straight gravy here, making all of our colored spells cost 1 less. And Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma, make our big creature spells cost 2 less, with the added bonus of giving a big creature, like our commander, +1/+1 and trample. But activating Anzrag's ability isn't the only way we can make sure it becomes blocked. And there's no card that does this better than our copy of Roar of Challenge. For just a small investment of 3 mana, we can make it such that all creatures able to block our commander this turn do so, while also giving indestructible since it's ferocious. Other spells we have here kinda do the same thing, like Compel Duel, King Herald's Revenge, and Enlarge. These spells also make it so that our opponents must block our commander while pumping it up, sometimes by a lot. We're also playing spells like Provoke and Irresistible Prey, which simply forces a creature to block it if able. We also get to draw a card with those spells. Nice! Armed and Dangerous is a fun split card with Fuse that can pop up a creature and give it double strike and/or make all creatures able to block it do so. Keep in mind that if you cast a spell fused, both armed and dangerous can have different targets. So if you think you can knock out a player with a creature you target with armed, you can make them not be able to block by making another creature you control dangerous. But here we have a fun inclusion, Grappling Hook. Not only does it give the equipped creature double strike, adding more aggression and survivability, but whenever it attacks, we can have a creature of our choice block it, ensuring that we can get our extra combats. And of course, we can't go without mentioning Lure and Predatory Impetus. Lure is a great aura to put on our commander to make sure all creatures able to block it do so. And Predatory Impetus grants it a +3/+3 bonus, and must be blocked if able. We really don't mind that our commander will be goated, because we'll want to be attacking every turn with it anyway. Now despite our commander being a god, Anzrag is not indestructible, and has no way to come back from the dead like some other gods. So we need to find some ways to make sure that Anzrag can survive all of our combats. The first thing that comes to mind is just granting our commander indestructible. Anara, Wolved Familiar, and Spearbreaker Behemoth are our best budget options here. With Anara out in the field, it makes all commanders we control indestructible during our turn, and with the Behemoth, we can just pay 1 mana to make a creature with power 5 or greater indestructible. Easy. Of course, we can also play spells like Withstand Death and Mortal's Resolve to give a quick indestructibility. Other cards like Terrifying Presence and Winds of Calcisma are great here too, since those spells are basically one-sided fog effects. But sure, why not? Let's play actual fog effects too, just in case. Like Fog, and Spore Frog, and Blinding Fog, which can also grant Hexproof. And speaking of Hexproof, Collective Resistance can grant a creature Hexproof and indestructible, while also functioning as a good removal spell for artifacts and enchantments. But I do have a special card for this deck. Let's take a look at You Look Upon the Tarrasque. For 5 mana at instant speed, you can either prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control, or have target creature get +5/+5, indestructible, and have all creatures your opponents control able to block it do so. This crazy spell does exactly what we want to do here. Another special inclusion I'm excited for is Zilortha, Strength Incarnate, which, by the way, I love that WotC printed this card in Commander Masters. After having the Godzilla version for so long, this just feels right. For just 5 mana, we get a 7/3 Trampler that says, lethal damage dealt to creatures you control is determined by their power rather than their toughness. So basically, Zilortha is reverse Arcades or Doran, essentially making our commander an 8/8 and not an 8/4, adding a little bit of survivability to all of our high-power creatures. One last special protection card we're playing is the Nuke Panda special, Family's Favor. Whenever we attack, we get to put a shield counter on an attacking creature, and whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, we remove the counter to draw a card. So basically during each combat we'll put a shield counter on our commander, which will help make it survive, and then draw us a card once our opponents are out of creatures to block with. Huh. I guess Nuke Panda commander cards never cease to find niche places, do they? Clearly this deck wants us to attack a lot. So let's try to make our attacks so obnoxious that our opponents just accept their fate. Cactus Folk Sure Shot is a pretty funny creature to play here. A 4 mana 4/4 with Reach, Ward 2, and at the beginning of combat on our turns, other creatures we control with power 4 or greater gain Trample and Haste until end of turn. Giving our commander haste? Yes please. Frostification also does something similar. At the beginning of combat, we can either give a creature +2/+0, or Menace and Haste until end of turn. Remember, this ability triggers on each of our combats. So we can first give our commander Menace and Haste, then on each subsequent combat, give Anzrag +2 power, which will keep stacking until we're done attacking. We're also playing a neat little uncommon from MKM, Rope. Just Rope. Despite whatever thoughts you may have on the Clue and Magic crossover, this little equipment is pretty neat here. It gives the creature +1/+2, Reach, and makes it so that the equipped creature can only be blocked by one creature, adding to our commander's survivability. And when the rope is no longer useful, it's still a clue, so we can simply pay 2 to sacrifice it to draw a card at any time. I think it's neat. But boy does it pale in comparison to our copy of Indomitable Might. Now this enchantment can kill. Not only does it give a creature we have +3/+3, but it also makes it so that creature assigns combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Just slap this on our commander, and in just 2 hits, we can easily kill our opponents with commander damage. You shouldn't underestimate the strength of this card, and your opponents definitely won't. While we're pumping up our commander, let's talk about some ways we can deal even more damage to the table. The first is General Marhalt El's Dragon. This 4/4 Elf Warrior can give our commander +3/+3 until end of turn for each creature that blocks it. And with all of our must-be-blocked effects going on, we can easily make our commander gigantic with this, and then smack our opponents for a billion once we clear path. We're also playing spells like Siege Smash, which can function as either a split-second +3/+2 pump with Trample, or a quick artifact removal spell. And Temur Battle Rage, granting double strike and trample when Ferocious is online. We're also playing another MKM card here with Case of the Trampled Garden, which distributes 2 +1/+1 counters on creatures we control. Then if we control creatures with power 8 or more, we get an additional +1/+1 counter and trample whenever we attack. It's almost like this case was made for Anzrag. I wonder if he might be the culprit. But finally, for our pump category, we're playing a copy of Fires of Yavimaya, which grants our creatures haste, but can be sacrificed to give a +2 bonus to one of our creatures, and a copy of Blackblade Reforged. What happens when you give a mole a sword? Oh, complete devastation, probably. Alright, I think we're done talking about our commander, and can start talking about other ways we can take advantage of it. Since Anzrag gives us extra combats, the remaining slots here try to capitalize on doing just that. Atali Primal Storm is a great extra combat payoff here. Every time it attacks, each player exiles the top card of their library, and we can cast any number of those spells without paying their mana costs. So be sure to have fun stealing your opponent's things to beat themselves in the face. And this card just got reprinted in the Bloomburrow Commander decks, so getting your hands on a copy should be pretty easy. Another creature we're running is Tectonic Giant. When it attacks or becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, we can either deal 3 damage to each opponent, or impulse draw 2 cards, dealing some extra damage to try and close out the game, or gain access to more cards when we're running out of options. An excellent inclusion. Another niche card I decided to put in is Doors of Durin. This Lord of the Rings rare allows us to scry 2 and we attack, and we may reveal the top card of our library. If it's a creature card, we put it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Being able to scry 2 and slam down another attacker is just the level of aggression that our opponents will need to deal with. The doors also have additional text, giving the creature that enters trample if we control a dwarf, and hexproof if we control an elf. Unfortunately, we're not running any dwarves in this deck, but we are running some elves, so be on the lookout and don't forget your hexproof. Another card I want to talk about is a card from the Doctor Who Commander decks, Last Night Together. For 5 mana, we choose 2 target creatures, untap them, and put 2 +1/+1 counters on each of them. They gain Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase, but only the chosen creatures can attack during that combat phase. This spell can act as your finisher. Just when your opponents think they're in the clear after your first wave of combat steps, you surprise them by untapping them, giving them all the keywords we want, and smack in for hopefully the final points of damage. A nice cheap card that works perfectly for what we're trying to accomplish. The last thing for us to talk about is our removal package and some extra filler cards. Of course, we're running some traditional removal spells like Chaos Warp, Decimate, and Abrade. Just some real cheap and efficient ways to interact with any of our opponent's problematic stuff. And I would be remiss if we didn't include our commander's namesake, Anzrag's Rampage. A nice one-sided artifact board wipe that can give us an extra creature to attack with that turn. And since a good amount of our creatures are huge, Fight and Bite effects are pretty good includes. So Bridgeworks Battle and Stump Stomp are great MDFCs that can just be lands if we are tight on mana. We also got a surprise Rattlesnake effect in Gift of the Viper, a great 1-mana way to get rid of an opponent's attacking or blocking creature. Now while that's all of our removal, I wanted to try and include a way to bring back and reuse some cards. That's why I put in a copy of Pinnacle Monk, a new MDFC that can either be a land, or a 2/2 with prowess that gets us an instant or sorcery card from our graveyard back. We can use this to great effect, since a lot of our spells we want to use are instants and sorceries. And the last non-land cards we're playing are just some extra ways to draw some cards. Harmonize, a classic here, simply drawing us 3 at sorcery speed, and Hunter's Insight, which draws us cards equal to the amount of damage target creature deals to a player or planeswalker. Easy peasy. Now that all of our non-lands are taken care of, let's talk about what lands we're putting in. Fortunately, we're playing a bunch of dual lands here. Command Tower, Cinderglade, Game Trail, Gruul Turf of course, the new Mossfire Valley, Temple of Abandon, Sheltered Thicket, Wooded Ridgeline, and an exotic orchard for good measure. We're also playing the animate land Restless Ridgeline, which functions as a dual land but can become a 3/4 dinosaur until end of turn, where, whenever it attacks, another attacking creature gets +2/+0 and untaps it. We're also playing some really fun lands, like Kessig Wolfrun. For X, a red and a green, we can give a creature +X/+0 and trample, just to really amplify the damage output we can deal. We got a Rogue's Passage in here just in case we really need to get through to our opponents for the win, and a Mosswort Bridge as an extra payoff for having all of our creatures with such large stats. Bonder's Enclave is really neat here, since with our commander out, we can simply pay 3 mana and tap it to draw a card. Finally, the last of our non-basics is filled in with an Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Myriad Landscape, just to ensure that we get the necessary lands that we need. Back all that up with 10 copies of Forest and 9 copies of Mountain, and there we have it. A full and complete commander deck built for just $50 that you can bring to your next game night. Now that we got our $50 version of the deck built, let's throw another $50 into it and see what upgrades we can make with our new $100 budget. And with these additional funds, we're making 38 total swaps to help take this deck to the next level. So with that, let's start again with our ramp package. Our ramp package is the most affected section of our deck with our extra spending money. With our increased budget, we get to add one more mana dork in the form of Fyndhorn Elves to match our Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic, and a copy of Utopia Sprawl. Honestly, I'm quite surprised that these cards are over $2 right now. But that's not all. We've also added some other mana producers into the mix, like Savage Ventmaw and Grand Warlord Radha. Now these two cards can give us a boatload of mana when we attack with them. And the best part is that we get to keep and use the mana as steps and phases end until we end our turn. So if we need to cast something in our second main phase, we can still use that mana. Also, we get to add in more rampant creatures that help us get our lands, like Sakura Tribe-Elder and Adeline Jackal. And speaking of land tutors, we get to add the much needed ramp spells, Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, as well as Nature's Lore and Farseek. And lastly for our ramp package, we get to add our commander staples, Gruul Signet, Arcane Signet, and of course our Sol Ring. A lot of these ramp cards also got reprinted in the Bloomburrow commander decks, so you should totally pick these up if you haven't already. Next, let's upgrade our forced block effects, and we get two spicy cards for you. The first is Nemesis Mask, an easy 3-mana equipment that states all creatures able to block the equipped creature do so. A very easy and simple way to make sure Anzrag gets those extra combats. This next one is coming straight out of Stronghold. It's Invasion Plans, a completely terrifying little enchantment. For 3 mana, we make it so that all creatures must block if they're able to, and the attacking player chooses how each creature blocks during each combat. Not only does this card work well with our commander, but it also allows us to take control and choose how our opponents block, helping to ensure our commander's survival. But be wary, even though we're more likely to take advantage of the invasion plans, it's still a global effect, so our opponents can take advantage of it too if we're not too careful. Let's move on to our protection spells. First is Stonehoof Chieftain, an 8-mana 8/8 with Trample and Indestructible, that also allows our other attacking creatures to gain Trample and Indestructible as well. This card, while expensive to cast, is fantastic, since it covers our entire board and not just one thing. Hajar Loyal Bodyguard also works well here. For just a red and a green, we get a 3/3 human soldier that we can sacrifice at any time to give legendary creatures we control +1/+0 and indestructible until end of turn. But we are swapping out some fog effects for more targeted protection. Tyvar's Stand is really good here, giving a creature hexproof and indestructible, as well as a +X/+X if we really need the pump. But just so you know, X can be 0, so you can still surprise your friends with just 1 mana. And Gaia's Gift is another fantastic inclusion, giving a creature a +1/+1 counter, reach, trample, hexproof, and indestructible. So many things for just 2 mana. Next, we got 3 new cards to add just to make our attacks a little bit more problematic. First is Mage Slayer, a sweet equipment from Kamigawa that says when the equipped creature attacks, it deals damage equal to its power to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. Slap this on our commander and start doming them in the face for 8 every combat, and every time they block, they're 1 step closer to getting knocked out. We're also adding a copy of Garruk's Uprising here. This card lets us draw some additional cards, but we're mainly playing it for the trample it provides to our entire team. Same thing with Rancor, a classic 1-mana aura that gives +2/+0 and trample, while recurring itself whenever it falls off. Now let's get into our pump upgrades, of which we're making 4 swaps. The first is Helena and Elena Partners. These 2 roommates have first strike and reach, and at the beginning of combat on our turn, we put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature we control, where X are the completely platonic best friend's power. And that creature gains haste. Make our creatures huge and hasty? Yes please. Speaking of haste, let's add a copy of Rising of the Day from the Lord of the Rings. Just a simple blanket statement of giving all of our creatures haste, while also giving a small boost to all of our legendary creatures. The last 2 pump effects are both equipment, Two-Handed Axe and the Spear of Leonidas. The Two-Handed Axe is a special one here since it has an adventure we can cast at instant speed, giving target creature we control double strike. Then, once it's on the field, we can double the equipped creature's power every time it attacks. This thing will get obnoxious to our opponents and will keep doubling our power on each combat step. And the funny part is, if we have 7 mana to burn, we can do both on the same turn. The Spear of Leonidas, however, is just a great utility tool in our arsenal. When we attack, we can choose to give the creature double strike, make a horse token, or get a free Faithless Looting effect. A real nice card that gives us plenty of options. One extra card we're swapping in today is Ilharg the Raise Boar. Now that's a Gruul god if I've ever seen one. A 5-mana 6/6 trampler that sneak attacks another creature from our hand? Absolutely. And we do this every time it attacks? That's too good to be true. And it keeps going. If it were to die or be exiled, it just goes back on top of your deck so you can play it again. Truly a wonderful inclusion here. But we also upgrade our extra combat finisher. Overpowering Attack from Assassin's Creed is an excellent spell that has the potential to have us start our extra combat loops all over again for a low cost of 3 mana if we've dealt combat damage to a player with our commander. Talk about aggressive to the extreme. Now with our extra funds, we can put in some more reliable removal spells. Beast Within is a commander classic able to destroy any target permanent in exchange of giving that player a 3/3 beast token, and Domri Anarch of Bolas has the option to -2 to make a creature of ours fight. Domri here is extra useful in the fact that it can uptick to make a mana and make creature spells we cast uncounterable, and gives a nice little pump to all of our creatures. The last of our non-land upgrades are our recursion and draw spells. Let's add a copy of Eternal Witness, another commander staple that lets us reuse a card in our bin, as well as a copy of Return of the Wild Speaker, allowing us to draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures we control. You can cast Return of the Wild Speaker for its other mode, but you'll most likely be casting it to draw cards rather than pumping up your board. Then lastly, we got our neat inclusion of Infiltration Lens. This equipment lets us draw 2 cards for each creature that blocks our equipped creature, a real easy way to let us draw literally so many cards in this deck. Finally, we get to upgrade our land base just a touch. First are our simple dual lands. Let's put in a copy of Rootbound Crag and Carplusion Forest, just to make our mana more consistent. Then lastly, our utility lands. We'll be putting in a Reliquary Tower since we put in some more card draw effects, and a Skarg, the Rage Pits, just to give us that extra oomph when giving a creature +1/+1 and trample. But probably the best land that we can include in this upgrade is a copy of Tyrite Sanctum. This is a staple in a lot of god decks, since it can continuously put +1/+1 counters on our legendary creatures and make them gods. Or simply pay 4 mana to put an indestructible counter on a god we control, like our commander. This utility land is seriously too good in this deck. And that's it for a $100 upgrade guide. But don't click off yet, because next up is my top 10 budgetless cards to save up to. And trust me, if you made it this far, you'll want to know what powerful cards that are perfect inclusions for this deck. Let's start off our list with an honorable mention. Aggravated Assault. This 3 mana enchantment does only one thing, and that's give us extra combats for the small price of 5 mana. And this effect isn't a one-off either. We can activate this ability as many times as we want, as long as we have the mana to do so. So long as we got a way to make mana, like with our Savage Ventmaw, we can keep attacking and attacking to our heart's content. But at $7, it's a little hard to justify the inclusion in our budget builds, so that's why it's our honorable mention. Coming in at our number 10 slot is a fun equipment that helps our commander's survivability. It's the Hammer of Nazan, coming at around $12. When the hammer or another equipment enters, we can attach that equipment to a creature we control. It also gives the equipped creature +2/+0 and indestructible. This card is great since we're running a good amount of equipment in this deck, and saving mana on our equip costs is just what we need to save our mana for our more important spells, such as our Protection Suite or our Spot Removal. Plus, giving our commander indestructible is exactly what we're looking for in a great equipment card, and is an excellent inclusion if we can spend the extra cash. Invading this list at number 9 is a copy of Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus, at around $12. Now I probably don't need to tell you the power of Zopandrel. This thing has been a bomb since its debut in All Will Be One. Doubling the power and toughness on each creature we control on each combat is dumb, plus combining this card with our commander means we'll be clocking in with a 16-8. Then if we get an extra combat, it'll double again and become a 32-16, a 64-32, and so on. And if our opponents try to kill the Dominus, it has the easiest way to give itself an indestructible counter. 2 Phyrexian green and sacrificing 2 creatures is very attainable in most games. If you can attain a copy of Zopandrel, you'll no doubt feel the power it wields. Our number 8 isn't very exciting, but it's necessary in any red-green deck. It's a copy of Commercial District, coming in at around $13. Ever since these Surveil lands came out earlier this year in MKM, they've taken Commander by storm. Sure, they enter the battlefield tapped, but they do have 2 basic land types which is relevant for land tutors, and Surveil is a powerful mechanic that can help smooth out our draws, especially in the early game. Just a good reliable dual land. Similar to our number 8 slot, coming in at number 7 is Spire Garden for around $14. Now I fully understand that upgrading our land slots aren't very exciting, but I do think it's necessary since we're running so many tapped lands, and Spire Garden can help out with that for a relatively low cost. As long as we have 2 or more opponents, this land will always enter untapped, plain and simple. No need to take a turn off just so we can play a land that will need to enter tapped. Just play the garden and move on with whatever you want to do in your turn. Just a good quality of life improvement overall. Coming in hot at instant speed is the Lord of the Rings special, Mithril Coat, at around $14. This little artifact does so much. First, it has flash, so we can surprise our opponents in the middle of combat. Second, it's indestructible, so good luck trying to get rid of it without exiling. And whenever it enters, we automatically attach it to a legendary creature we control, and it gives the equipped creature indestructible. Just wow. Mithril Coat does everything we want it to, keeping our commander alive, and help deliver absolute devastation to our opponents. What more can we ask for? Cracking our top 5 is the best green protection spell, Heroic Intervention, coming in at around $14. Just when our opponents think they can get away with a board wipe or try to otherwise remove our stuff, Heroic Intervention is here to save the day. For just an easy 2 mana at instant speed, we can give all of our permanents hexproof and indestructible. Now you don't need me to tell you that's amazing, but its high price tag is really the only thing stopping us from running it. If you can get your hands on a copy, you'll be happy with the results. Stomping in at number 4 is Stomping Ground. This final land card on our list will cost about $15, but it is both a classic and a commander staple in any good red-green deck. It has both relevant land types for our land tutors, and it can enter the battlefield untapped as long as we can pay the low cost of just 2 life. Losing 5% of our starting life total is no sweat, if it means we get to play the game faster. And because it's a dual land, it smooths out our mana base, making sure we can cast any spell that comes our way. Personally, I'm a little surprised this card costs so much right now since it just got reprinted in Ravnica Remastered, but whatever. On to the top 3. Taking our number 3 slot is the delightful Lord of the Rings card, Delighted Halfling, coming in at around $17. Now one of the things that can stop this deck dead in its tracks is counter magic, and boy will your opponents attempt to counter our commander in this deck. But with the Delighted Halfling, we won't need to worry about that. This little 1/2 for 1 can either simply make a colorless mana, or it can make a colored mana that can only be spent to cast a legendary spell, like our commander. And if we use it for a legendary spell, that spell can't be countered. The bane of all control decks. Otherwise, it's just a mana dork. It can still help you in casting your other non-legendary spells, so have fun. Our number 2 top budgetless card is definitely the most expensive on our list, and that's the Great Henge, coming in at around $60. Ignoring the dollar sign for a moment, this card is a powerhouse. First, it starts off at 9 mana, but it costs X less, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. And it's a good mana rock, being able to tap for 2 green and gain you 2 life in the process. And whenever a non-token creature enters under your control, we put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. This card sounds great, so why isn't it at our number 1? Well, first is the price tag. $60 is a lot of cash for just one card, and even I'm hesitant to spend that much. But the major issue I have in this is that it's just generically good. Like, this card is good in any green deck it's in, not just Anzrag. It doesn't feel special here. Say we cast our commander using its ability, gain the 2 life, put a counter on Anzrag, and then draw a card. It doesn't do anything past that, and doesn't really synergize with what we're doing. Don't get me wrong, this is still an amazing include, and if you have one you should definitely include it, but it's not very exciting, for me at least. But that's enough for our number 2 pick. Let's see what we got as our number 1 include. Our number 1 top budgetless card to include, first printed in 2007's Lorwyn block, it's Dolmen Gate, coming in at $22. And oh my god, this card. Typically, we only see effects like this in white or white-red, so getting one on a colorless artifact is just simply amazing. For just 2 generic mana, we get an artifact that says to prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to attacking creatures we control. Easy, breezy, beautiful. As long as this card is on the field, our creatures will never die during our combat steps, and we can freely attack whatever or whoever we want without repercussion. Anzrag's dream, and totally worth the price. Other than a printing on the list and in secret layers, this card was only printed in Lorwyn, so getting your hands on a copy might be a little troublesome, but if you do, you won't be disappointed. And that's all I got for you guys today. Just as a reminder, if you'd like this video and want to see more, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel more than you know. Plus, I'd like seeing the numbers go up, so there's that. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you like about this deck? What don't you like about this deck? Are you planning on building this deck? I'd love to hear it. Are you an Anzrag player and want to share some helpful tips? Let me know in the comments below. This was Jared on TMMTG, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!